So, I don't know, a week or so ago, I was talking to my therapist, and I was so upset about my hair, like, not looking nice. And, I said something to her because I was like, I look like my mother doesn't love me. And she was like, you what? And I was like, well, that's what my nan would say. I was like, if I showed up at home, she was like, you look, if you had holes in your socks or your hair wasn't done, or, you look like your mother doesn't love you, which is probably a horrific thing to say to a child. And
not true.
And yeah, exactly. And but it was one of those moments when I was really talking about, like, I couldn't figure out why I was so upset. So, I get my hair colored every 8 weeks. People have all kinds of things that they do on a regular schedule to kind of take care of themselves. And that's what we were talking about was, self-care, doing something for myself. And I was like, in over a year, I haven't had a regular hairdresser. Probably the first time in my life that that's ever happened to me. And I'm just kind of in between places. And the new place I wanted to try, we've been having some scheduling issues. And it's just like, it shouldn't be that hard. Like, it's not that hard of a thing. Like, I do hard things all the time at work. And,
yeah, it would seem like setting an appointment shouldn't be hard.
Should not be hard, especially when I have an executive assistant that helps me set appointments, right? So, and it just felt like, internally I was like, this is a dumb thing to be upset about. But I was upset that I didn't look nice, that my hair wasn't looking nice. And we were coming to record this podcast, this Hey Woman podcast that's dedicated to my nan. And I was like, I can't go and not have my hair looking nice. Because from beyond, she's going to think that my mother doesn't love me. Now, I know our listeners on here know that that's not true. They also probably are just listening to the audio version of this. And so what my hair looks like actually really doesn't matter. But it was so upsetting, and it was just like the crux of, I finally went and got it done the Saturday before I came here, and, I cried the whole way home. And I remember calling my sister, and I was like, this is so dumb. Like, I don't know why I'm so upset, but like, they didn't do it right. She was mean. I spent 3 hours there, and it was something that was supposed to be relaxing, and it just wasn't. It wasn't what I
really
wanted.
Didn't feel like self-care.
It didn't. And it was something that would have been like so important to my nan. Like, she just believed that you should show up in the world. It wasn't a vain thing. It was that, like, you should show up in the world.
We should take care of yourself.
And you should take care of yourself. And it's the way that you present yourself to the world. And that should always be with your best foot forward, because she believed that internally we had so much to give. And so we should kind of exude that externally. And that you should take care of yourself. And these were things that you should do. And, my sister was like, it's not dumb. And, I think for people listening, what I kind of want to talk about today, and I'll get into a little bit more like the hour that I spent crying on the way home from the hairdresser, but that so much of this, it's not dumb. And it wasn't that I was upset that my hair didn't look nice, or it wasn't as superficial as that, but I was upset because the person that I would have called after that horrific experience wasn't there. Mm-hmm. And so, this Hey Woman podcast is a place to replace those phone calls that I would have made to her. And, I knew what she would have said, but it wasn't the same. And so, hi, everybody. My name is Cortney. I'm here with my mom, Julie, who does, in fact, love me. And, we're here to talk about real conversations about caregiving, legacy, love. We're also here to talk about grief and the journey. And, one of the things, I think I said it to you, was, I thought I was doing so well.
Yeah.
Like, I hadn't broken down in a while. And I was like, what? I thought I was doing well. And the truth is I am. But sometimes it just hits you. And that's okay. And that's really what I want to talk about today.
Yeah, for me, it feels like, the waves of grief. Like, yeah, you think you're doing good. And then all of a sudden, boom, it hits you. And like you fall down and you're crying. And it's like, why now? What triggered it? But I think just understanding that that's part of the journey, and to be patient with yourself, that you're going to have these times. And it's good to stop and to feel how you're feeling.
And for me, like, she was the person that I would have called.
Which makes it so hard.
It is. Like, I left the hair salon after the woman had just yelled at me because I booked the wrong kind of appointment.
That you didn't maneuver their online system well enough. Maybe they should look at their online system, because you're I mean, you're a CPA, you're like I would think you could, if you had problems with it, maybe other people have.
Well, I've been getting my hair colored for almost 15 years. Like I know what I'm booking. Like and she was like, this is for return clients only. And it's like, well, it didn't say that, right? So I spent 3 hours there where this woman just tells me that I'm a buffoon and not very nicely. And, there was an issue with like how I got charged. It ended up being a lot more expensive than I anticipated. And I don't know that they charged me correctly. And now it just feels like, God, like one more thing. 'Cause now on Tuesday I have to call and be like, you never emailed me the receipt. And, it's not really about the money, although like I am upset, and then because then you're upset at yourself, and it's like, I'm not dumb. Like,
right, you're upset at yourself because you, like, the way you said it to me was like you made a mistake, right? But maybe you didn't. Maybe they're not as transparent as they should be,
Well, the 10% tariff fee that they charge definitely was not listed on the website, because I would have looked at that. And I think so often in caregiving, we get upset at ourselves, or we go try to do something nice for ourselves, and it doesn't live up to our expectations, and we get so upset about it. It's not really about that. Like, it's about
it's not really about your hair.
Oh, no. It's about all of these other little things that have been compounding, and it's been about, stress at work, and like, or, I'm really looking at like doing things around my apartment. It's funny. A really good friend of mine, Cody, came to visit me, and we've been friends our whole lives. You were friends with his parents growing up.
Yeah, still am, yeah.
And Cody just doesn't sit still. So I had this list of things that I wanted my dad to do, and he came to visit. Well, Cody just started knocking the things off, and I was like, well, hey, if it's going to get done 2 weeks earlier, that's great. Dad's happy, I'm happy. And one of the things is hanging up pictures that I had gotten from Nan, and so, I had kind of hesitated about putting them up. I wasn't sure where I wanted to put them. And I also hesitated because I've always wanted to paint my bedroom. And so I was telling Cody this, and I was like, well, just put them up. Like, I'm not going to make a decision about the color. Like, I just decided, like, we bought new furniture. It all kind of works together. I got myself a new bedspread. I was like, I'm not going to paint my room. But when I first moved into that apartment, it was the first apartment that I bought, and I remember it being such a big deal because I could paint, right? Like, I was no longer renting, so, like, you can paint if you want to, right?
Whatever color you want.
Exactly. And I didn't have to ask anybody. Like, I didn't have to, like, not saying that you can't paint if you rent, but you have to ask your landlord, or you have to paint it back when you leave, or all, like, this was mine, and I could do what I wanted. And sheets are a really big deal to my Nan. So she was like, I'm going to buy you new sheets for your bed, for your new place. And she's like, what color is your bedroom? And I was like, well, woman, like, I'm really thinking about, like, painting my bedroom, like, a navy blue. And so if you could
it really isn't your choice.
Right. And so she's like, I was like, what if you got me, like, light blue sheets or gray or something that would kind of, like, work with that? Because my room has this huge window. She's like, it's too dark. You can't paint your room navy blue. And I was like, no, I can. I was like, no, woman, like, I'm buying this. Like, I can. And here's the thing. Maybe it would have looked bad, but it's just paint. Like, you could, like, I could have fixed it.
Well, she would say that it'll make the room smaller.
Well, she did very loudly. She told me that. Yeah. And to the point where she wouldn't buy me the sheets because she told me I hadn't decided on a color. And so
cream wasn't good enough for the sheets, huh?
No. So then I'm telling Cody this story, and he's like, well, you obviously I lived there for 4 years. He's like, well, you haven't painted your bedroom. I was like, I know, that's why we're putting the pictures up, because I can't do it. Right. Like, I can't do it. And so, there's all these home projects that I'm moving forward, and like, I would have called her, and I would have talked to her about them, and you just,
and even if you knew what she would say, it was still nice to, like, talk it through with her.
Yes. Yeah. For her to tell me that the 10 reasons why what I wanted to do wasn't the right thing to do. And so I think for our listeners, like, knowing what somebody would say and actually having them say it are two different things. And the grief wave is real. And it's real sometimes in the grief process. It's also very real in the caregiving process too. So often it's so easy. You see these like trendy news articles that are like, caregivers have to take care of themselves, which I totally agree with. And then they say things like, you need time for self-care, like go for a spa weekend. Well, I don't know about you. I love a spa weekend. But if somebody's in the throes of caregiving, like, how do they ever even begin to try to do that?
Yeah, it's so hard. And I think I think, the question is, what parts of that can you do?
Right.
And also like for a caregiver defining what actually is helpful to them. So it might not be helpful to go to a spa weekend or get away. It might actually be helpful just to be home by yourself for a weekend, so I think, that caregiver kind of defining what would be helpful to them, but also acknowledging that, here we are talking about, grief. But you said this, and I want to underline it and go back to it because I think it's important for people to hear. Yeah, my mom has passed away, but there was losses along the way, and so the grief process starts when you're caregiving, because there's, I could turn back the process to when my stepdad was sick, and my mom was always the person that I relied on for you kids. Like if I was working and couldn't get off work and you were sick or had to go to the doctor, she was thrilled to like take you guys. But then when my stepdad was sick, she couldn't, because she couldn't leave him. And I understand that, but that's a loss,
It
you
is.
know? And then, when mom is, not able to do something that we had always done, go to a restaurant because it's, doesn't have accessible facilities, that's a loss. Having to deal, having to, be the decision maker, almost the parent to your parent. That's a hard transition. That's a loss. You've lost being able to deal with that. And in our situation, I didn't have as many losses. Because Nan's mind was relatively good. Her mm-hmm. issues were much more physical. But when we have things like dementia, there's a person that you're caregiving for who isn't, that person. Who you can't have those conversations with, even while they're alive, And certainly Nan went downhill. But I think, until the end, she still was really good for a phone call about your hair.
She was. And it might not have been as long.
Right.
So, like Nan and I, on a Saturday morning, I could be cleaning my apartment and she could chit chat with me for 45 minutes to an hour and not think mm-hmm. anything of it. And I'm doing my thing, she's doing her thing. And, those got whittled down to maybe more like 20 minutes. But she was still there. Mm-hmm. And, it wasn't even that I wanted her to solve my problem, which she would have tried to, right? She would have mm-hmm. tried to solve the problem of, I'll just give you the money, or I'll just make you an appointment. Like, there mm-hmm. were years in there where if I had called her and said, I just can't find anybody, like, I don't know what to do, like, she would have marched herself into her hairdresser and said, like, you're demanded. Coming, and demanded, like, and she would have just, like, when I came home, like, she would have just, like, told me to go and say, like, the appointment's made, like mm-hmm. And it's not, so it's hard because it's not that I missed her solving the problem, it's that I missed her telling me that, like, it wasn't me, like I wasn't the one that was dumb, I wasn't the one that caused right. this problem.
Well, and so much of I think learning to support people, so much of it isn't solving the problem. So much of it is just validating somebody's feelings and hearing them out. And I think too, for me, as the mom of like the grandchildren, like I've had to switch my roles, because like you called me when you wanted a solution, and you called her when you wanted somebody just to support them. And I have to now check myself when you're on the phone calling me. Am I supposed to be in mom mode of solution orientedness, or am I supposed to be in Nan mode of support orientedness? Like, and just like, listening to you and not taking action or not suggesting, so is it that I'm going to talk to you and be in the situation of suggesting 5 other hair salons that do really well with, curly hair, or am I going to be, I'm just saying, yeah, that sucks. So what's my mode, definitely has changed. And I have to be conscious of being in that mode. Now it's interesting for you, I can kind of go back and forth, but like for some, I have to like ask, what do you want from me?
Well, and sometimes I think you don't know.
Right.
Like sometimes I actually don't know until I get the whole thing out, like what I want. And sometimes, I stare at my phone for so long. And I still do this. I stare at my phone because I don't know who to call. Like, and I can call you and I can call Steph, and, it's so blessed to be able to call so many different people. Or my Nan's sister, my Aunt BB, sometimes I'll call Aunt BB. But sometimes it's just the fact that none of the people are going to be the person that I want on the other end of the phone.
So as good as they are, they're not her.
They're not. And that's really hard because sometimes I'll just sit there and stare at my phone and not do anything. And then I'm just, the wave just hits you all over again. And so, you know, I got home that night and I was going to do things for work. I was leaving for New York City. And then right from New York City, I'm going back home to Pennsylvania with you. And I had to pack for a whole week. I hadn't packed a thing. Like, I just sat on the couch. I couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
And eventually I got myself packed. I have no idea what clothes are in my suitcase.
Could be an interesting week, huh?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
But there's a washing machine at home, and that's what I'm going with. So, you know, you just don't know, but you can only do what you can do. And I also really want to spend some time, because you've heard me say it a couple of times on here, but like, minimizing it, or people are saying that's so dumb, or like I feel vain maybe for like worrying about this. None of it's dumb. None of it's vain. Mm-hmm. None of it's, because you can only control what you can control. And sometimes what you can control is your hair and your clothes. And sometimes that's self-care. Some people are sitting here and they're like, God, I don't want to do any of that. And that's okay. Like, you have to find what works for you. But if something that like kind of the external world would perceive as being small has you sitting on the couch crying for an hour, one, it's probably not about that. But none of it's dumb, even if that is what you're upset about.
Yeah, and you know, you should feel how you feel, and you shouldn't minimize that, because that is how you feel, you know. And I think one is just letting yourself feel that way, which is so hard. The reason we try not to is because it's uncomfortable. Right. But actually, part of the process of healing is letting yourself feel those feelings. It's like you got to walk through grief, and so that becomes hard. But I think also, one of the things that often we don't do well is telling other people how we want supported. And so, just being able to say to somebody, this is what would be helpful to me. So if you're in that situation and you're crying and somebody does come in with solutions, often that's what my husband would do. Like, and please know I appreciate him very much, but he would come in and tell me the 7 solutions. And it's like, I didn't really want somebody to solve my problem. I actually just wanted to be heard. And I just wanted somebody to say, yeah, that really stinks. And I think in relationships, you have to learn to say that. Like, I appreciate your solutions, but right now, I just, want to hand up my back, and I just want to feel this way. And I want to be upset that my mom's not here and I can't call her. And don't give me a solution for that. Let me just be here. And so I think you're going to get better outcomes as the caregiver or as somebody going through their grief process if you can articulate what you need. And I hear what you're saying. Sometimes you don't know, so you can't articulate it. But if you can, don't be afraid to. I think that's really important. I also think, we talk in here about self-care, and we talk about things that maybe we would do. But I think it's important, like you said, people don't have to do it that way. Like, I remember when my kids were growing up, and like so many people said, like, you have to get away for a weekend. And so I went away with like a bunch of women for a weekend. And please note, they were lovely, wonderful women, wonderful. But all I could think about was, DJ's basketball game tournament. And that's where I wanted to be, So for me, self-care wasn't going away with a bunch of women for the weekend while I was raising my kids. And that might be for other people. Please know there's nothing wrong with that. For me, it was, maybe not being so rushed, not being like, for me, I feel like at my job, I'm always like moving forward. So for me, self-care could have just been, instead of like, my husband goes one way with one kid, I go another way with another kid, maybe we somehow merge that together, or somebody else rides along with me. Or I'm not just like rush. I'm going to rush out of there, go to here. So like, is there something I can get rid of? And really think about, so if I have to do 3 things on a Saturday, what are the most 2 important to me? And get rid of the third, kind of no matter what it is. And so that also can be self-care. And I know it's hard because I'm saying to you, figure out what you need and ask for it. And I hear what, Cortney said, which is like, not even sure what I want. And there's definitely been times in my life where I couldn't even articulate what would be helpful to me. I think if you're in that situation, you just need to sit with like feeling uncomfortable and upset And I just allow that as a natural process. And then encourage yourself to be honest. I think particularly people who are caregivers are used to doing what other people need, that they've shut off what they need.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to say to somebody, I don't know what I need right now. And I'm going to go.
But what you're saying to me right now, isn't it?
Yeah. But like, I know that.
But I'm sure it's not this. No,
but I'm
just
sure.
Joking.
And sometimes you have to cross things off your list. Like, you know what I mean? Like, but it's also like, because sometimes when people give suggestions, they can be upset when you don't take them.
Yes.
And so just saying to them very nicely, like, it's just not resonant. Like, I don't know what I need. And I appreciate you trying to get me there.
Right.
But I just don't think that this is it. I think can be really helpful and really important. It's just an open line of communication so that people don't get their feelings hurt, because then sometimes you internalize that, right? So now you're already feeling bad and you're like, oh my God, now I'm like being mean to this person. You're not. You're just going through something, but they don't know that. And so now you've created this other problem that you have to fix. And so what we're talking about right now is not just like saying what's on your mind, whether you know what you want or you don't, just kind of saying that and setting an expectation with people so it doesn't kind of morph into this bigger thing that takes on a life of its own. That's just one more problem for you to solve. You know, it's interesting when you say about like not going away for the weekend. I, again, was talking to my therapist about like doing like self-care or something like that. And she was like, well, why don't you go away for the weekend? Like, why don't you like, and I like got on, you know, Airbnb, and I was like, you know, it would be really neat. Like, I love fall in New England. Like, what if I took Minnie, my dog, and her and I went to like a cute little like cabin in Vermont, and we went on a walk and like went to a cute little coffee shop. And then I thought about like, oh my God, and then I have to like pack a bag and I have to make sure they're pet friendly. And like, what if they are pet friendly and they've had other dogs and she decides to like go to the bathroom in the house, like the dog's housebroken, but like you just worry about like all these things. And I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. Like, great suggestion, but that's not what I want to do. What I want to do is sit in my own apartment and finally like put my laundry away. Like, I want to change the sheets on my bed. I want to walk through Home Goods with a pecan crunch oat milk latte and not have to rush.
Right.
I don't want like this. So sometimes I think, you know, self-care gets a trendy rap, I think, a little bit. And sometimes people think it has to be like this big thing. But honestly, so my sister moved into a new house, and her and I, we did that. We went and got ourselves a coffee. We just walked through Home Goods. We didn't know what we wanted. We didn't really need anything. And she got a cute little pumpkin and I got a cute little thing. And now we're just happy. Like, because when I see it in my apartment, I'm like, oh, like that was that fun afternoon with Steph. It was just an hour out of my day. And I think, you know, sometimes people think it has to be like this big thing. But sometimes that's where, like, if you go back to like my hair story, what I was upset about is that like I had built this up into being like such this great thing. I was going to go, it was going to be 2 hours, it was going to be uninterrupted. And then when it didn't meet my expectation, it was just one more thing that let me down. And so sometimes I think the best form of self-care is actually doing like more lower level things more often. Because you don't build it up in your head, and then there's no real place for you to get disappointed, because you're able to kind of do it on a more regular basis, and it truly is something that helps and moves you forward.
Well, and most change is incremental, you know, and it's, you know, there's a book called The Compound Effect, where like small changes have a compounding effect. So even something like, you know, somebody who's out there listening and thinking they don't have any time to do anything, they do have time to take a walk for 10 minutes in the middle of, you know, sunshine, if it's, you know, if it's sunny out, or to take their dog for a walk. You know, I get caught up in that, like, oh, I don't have time to do that. Yeah, I do. Like, I'm not saying you have an hour or 2 hours, but everybody has 10 minutes.
Right.
Like, you know, so, and if you start with whether it's, a morning ritual, you know, where you get up, and maybe, you know, for those of you who like to spend some quiet time in prayer, that you do that. It doesn't have to be an hour long ritual, 10 minutes. You know, for me, that 10 minutes out we have a swing outside on our porch. I love sitting on that swing. And it's funny. It's not that far out of our house, but like nobody comes and bothers me on that swing. And they can sit and watch TV and they can see me out the window. They know I'm on the swing. But as soon as I come in the house, like people will run to me, So that's my little oasis. So I would say to people, like you're saying, like taking it down a level, not being something elaborate, but also, start with a small amount of time and just say, twice a week, I'm going to do this and then build on that, and again, I said, go for a walk, but that has to be something that you want to do.
Right.
Now it should be something that's, kind of good for you.
Right.
So, I'm not sure, like if your thing was to get, ice cream 5 times a week, maybe not the best, but hey, you start somewhere. It's a routine and a habit, right?
Right. I think too, like this kind of goes to a conversation you and I were having the other day where, so my brother has started working at the law firm that you and I work at, and people get lunch out every day, and I think that's a common thing for people who don't think they have a lot of time. They don't want to pack their lunch. It ends up getting really expensive. And so, we were talking to him about, you always would get a coffee or get lunch out on Thursdays.
Yep. Let myself get into work like 15 minutes, a half an hour later, because I was tired by Thursday, mm-hmm. and this was in the throes of caregiving. And I would stop and get myself a coffee that one day a week. And that, it did make me happy.
And it's funny, like even though I don't go into an office, I still carry that Thursday thing through. I don't know what it is about Thursday. Like, it's like I've gotten to Thursday, but I don't have the energy of like, it's Friday. Mm-hmm. But like, I'm tired on Thursday. And I don't know if I've just like internalized that from like working at the office, but we used to order out lunch on Thursdays. And so I do that. So I either order out lunch, like to get delivered to my apartment, or I will walk the dog and get like a coffee on Thursday morning. I'll kind of do one or the other. And like that's my little self-care treat, or like whatever I do is like Thursday, because it's like, well, I got here. And mm-hmm. sometimes you don't have time to do all of these big things, but you just want to be like, I got here. Mm-hmm. And this Absolutely. Is what I need to do.
Yeah, and sometimes we have to, instead of being like thinking about all the things you didn't get done, I think we have to go back and like, we got there.
Yep.
Like we got some stuff done and we got there, and everybody's still alive, right?
Right.
Sometimes raising kids, I felt that way. But I think we don't also, celebrate those successes. I think is like, and getting there is a success, even though it doesn't always feel like it.
So I want like people listening to like take a couple of seconds or just take a moment and take a deep breath and think about like, what's one thing that they can do for themselves? Or if you're caregiving for somebody, I know we've done other podcast episodes about like caring for caregivers and different things like that. But I really want people to think about like, what do they need? Like, what do they mm-hmm. want? And I am continuously on the hunt for a hairdresser because clearly my last adventure did not work. So, that's what I need, and that's what I'm going to take. And now I have 8 weeks to figure it out, right, until my next appointment. So I have time. So it's not a crisis. That's the other thing that kind of made that really hard, was that, like, I felt like I was bumping up against some sort of preconceived like deadline of we're recording the podcast and therefore I had to do it, right?
Your hair looks very nice, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I, the listeners can see it on the YouTube version or, on social media when we clip it, but they can let me know. But I think, also part of like the stress is it was a crisis, or at least I had created one. And so thinking about places where they can like interject self-care or like different things that they can do for themselves before it becomes a crisis, before you're sitting on the couch and you're like, I can't even move, I don't know what I need to do, mm-hmm. Can allow that to become more a normal part of their routine. And I love what you said about the morning practice. It's funny, when I had first heard of that, it was an executive coach that was talking about it, and they worked such a fluid job, and so like they got up and they did like sunrise yoga and they did this and they journaled and that, and I was like, oh my god, that would take like an hour and a half, like
half my day.
I know, I was like, oh my god, like I have to get up, I have to commute to work, I have to pack my lunch. So I was like, oh my god, like I can't do all of that. Mm-hmm.
And the first time I heard about it was when I was raising you kids, and like I honestly couldn't even go to the bathroom without somebody coming in, like, you know, so a little bit of a difference in transition, but yeah.
Right, so like carving out an hour and a half when all you want to do is pee by yourself
Yes.
is like it's a big jump to make, and you're setting yourself up for failure because you're not going to be able to do it, and then you're just going to be upset at yourself.
Right.
So, you know, one of the small things I've done is I don't do like a full morning practice, but I don't drink my coffee at my desk anymore. So for those of us that work from home, it's so easy to make your coffee and make your breakfast and go sit at your desk and read emails and eat your breakfast and drink your coffee. I don't do that. I do it in my kitchen. It takes 5 to 10 minutes, but it's just 5 to 10 minutes of I reading a book or watching Netflix or whatever I'm doing, but it's not work related. And it just starts my day because it's like then when I sit down at my desk, I'm ready to start working, and I'm not also like eating my oatmeal or, you know, whatever. Right. Like, so, you know, for some of us that work from home that have a little bit more flexibility in our schedules, I think we can get into a rut of like, I have to get so much done because I have to get out to do something for caregiving. You start eating all of your meals at your desk, which can be really bad. I also don't eat lunch at my desk anymore. But the breakfast is the one that I feel like makes the biggest difference in my day-to-day, because it just starts it off on a much nicer note in which I'm listening to, you can listen to a podcast, for example.
Well, yeah, you could, you know, listen to another episode of Hey Woman.
And so I think, you know, thinking about different places to inject this into your life and into your routine, you can't go from 0 to 100, right?
Right.
You can't go from not being able to go into the bathroom by yourself, which anybody that's raising kids or a dog, I haven't peed by myself in 5 years.
Kids can knock. I suppose the dog doesn't, but yeah.
No, she just like pushes it with her nose. She pushes the door right open. That you can't go from 0 to 100. So you can't go from not doing anything to doing everything.
I just have to stop you because, you know, Minnie does push the door open with her nose. She does. And I'm still ticked about the fact she came home to our house, and we have 2 dogs, and she taught them how to push the door open with. They didn't know. Like, I have a Lab and a Bichon, and they never did things. The door was there, and they stayed behind the door. And then Minnie pushes it with her nose, and now they know to do that. Also, one of the dogs never went up the steps, and Minnie goes up the steps, and so now they go up the steps. So, yeah, I'm sorry. I just had to stop there and let all the listeners know that Minnie can create some problems when she's showing people all of these skills that she has.
It's that poodle in her. So Nan would say there's no such thing as a dumb dog.
True.
And so she definitely embodies that. And while your dogs weren't dumb, they just didn't push their boundaries.
No,
and
they didn't.
She's never really met a boundary that she hasn't pushed.
Yeah. So, you know, if you're listening, I mean, one of the things as a takeaway, I think, you know, I would hope everybody would just do one thing for themselves. And whether that's, you know, I loved your comments about, you know, not eating at your desk, you know, kind of having that morning time. Or if you like pick one thing, like go for a walk, get a cup of coffee, you know, buy it from someplace you wouldn't usually. And I would encourage people, the way habits like that form is, you know, be very specific about it. You know, so for me, like pick a day, whether, you know, my day's Thursday, but maybe your day's Monday, you know, or Tuesday, and every Tuesday you're going to do this, or every Tuesday and Thursday you're going to walk. Don't just say you're going to walk because you're never going to do it. Right. But if you say I'm going to walk every Tuesday, then you can every Tuesday, and at least you can evaluate yourself. Well, oh my gosh, it's Tuesday and I didn't walk, you know, so then you can move it. But if you don't really kind of get that into a habit and a routine and really look at your life and see where that time is, and my hope would be, you know, for people, you know, they could do something in the morning, because a morning practice is really important to everybody. But add some small self-care. And if you're listening and saying, hey, you know, I'm already kind of doing that, then maybe add something bigger. Add a weekend away or respite. So again, it kind of runs the whole gamut. But you said, you know, that one thing, you know, I'm just going to encourage people before you get off the podcast, figure out what your one thing is. And it doesn't have to be a perfect one thing, because you can have another one thing later. But just think about one thing and get it started, like move it forward.
And you could sit here and say, like, this is my one thing and I'm going to try it. And if it doesn't work, you can abandon it.
Yes.
Like, we're not tied to these things. And I think too, caregiving can be a really long journey. And I think sometimes people don't talk about that. And your life kind of goes on through that journey. So it could be something, if you are doing things for yourself right now, it might not be serving you the same way it did when you started it.
Right.
Because the journey changes, where you are in your life changes, and the needs of the person that you're caring for change, or the grief changes it. You talked earlier about Nan, and there's little losses along the way. You have to adapt to those little losses because they change the way that you're interacting with them, and it changes the way that you need things in your life, and that could change what you have to do for yourself.
Yeah, and I know we're bumping up on some time here, but kind of when you were talking about that, like changing what you need, I'd also say, there's a study out that says like every 5 to 7 years, the people in our lives can change, and I think sometimes in caregiving we get stuck, and relationships take work. So one of the things you could do too is reach out to somebody, reach out, have that phone call, not with your loved one that you're caregiving for, but reach out to somebody that's been important in your life and have a phone call with them. I spent this last weekend before this taping with a college roommate, and I went back to a reunion, and that was really, really helpful for me, kind of reconnecting, and tying some things together about, times in college and now. But it could be just having a phone call with a relative or a friend from a past, or, having somebody who is in your life and developing a new relationship. Maybe you have kids and you're meeting other parents. Maybe take the step farther and like go to lunch or have coffee. You have to, it's not just what you have to do, but it's who's in your life, and you do control that. And so I know at one point in time I went on a mission of, just taking time to have lunch with other women. And of course, some of that worked out great and some of it didn't. But it's really good. You have to make the effort for relationships too.
And I think what's really good about this is that relationships can change, but that doesn't mean it's bad. Mm-hmm. So I think, especially me, I think, I think about this, I'm 29, I'm almost 30, and I'm in an interesting place where like about half of my friends are getting married and having kids, and the other half are single and like me, like we're dating and doing different things. It's a very different life, right? Like, and so, my married friends, it's not that I don't go do things with them or hang out, but it can be a very different dynamic of what we can do, can't do. Like they're not going to go out with me to a bar necessarily with the same intention, because their significant other is at home, right? I also think, as you move in your career, like I'm in a different place. I manage staff, and a lot of my friends don't yet. They either work in bigger organizations or they work in a different field, and so that's not quite where they're at yet, or they don't want to.
Yeah. Or they never will in that field because it's different. Yeah.
Right. So there can be all kinds of reasons why some people are managing people and some people aren't, right? But there's a different stress and a different thought process for my day-to-day versus somebody else's, because I am managing people. I'm responsible for a whole other staff. And so the conversations can change, and friends that you've had since college, they can be different because they're at a different stage. It doesn't mean that they're bad. It doesn't mean that you don't see them anymore, but maybe you're putting more effort in different relationships and people that are at the same point in your life with you. So caregiving can be one of those really big things. If people aren't also in it, I think it can be hard to totally like understand like why you're making the same decision, why you're making the decisions that you're making. And if people have different relationships with the person they're caregiving, that can feel hard. And so it can feel like you don't have a person to talk to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point of this podcast. It can feel lonely.
It can.
It can. And if there's one thing that we wish for you is that you don't feel lonely. You're not alone. Caregiving is hard, and the journey is hard. And if you are feeling lonely, we hope this is a phone call for you. Yeah. But we also encourage you to be honest about that and seek out and develop relationships where you can talk about this. For many diagnoses, there's support groups, and they're always really good because there's somebody else who's going through what you're going through. And that's sometimes our friends can't meet us where we're at because they just haven't been through it before. And so, making sure that you, seek out resources and help. And we hope this podcast is just a big hug around you because you're not alone.
You're not. And I do want to say, being alone and being lonely are actually different.
Very true.
So you can be lonely in what you're going through, surrounded by people. And so that's what we really hope that this is doing, is kind of like shedding back some of that loneliness and kind of being honest about, like, this is really hard. Yes. And we're feeling it too. And we live this world kind of day in and day out, and all of your feelings are valid. And so we hope that this has been helpful, that this allows you to have some harder conversations with people, start opening up and telling people how you feel, because if they don't know, they can't change their behavior. And so hopefully this helps kind of maybe stop some conflict before it happens, so people aren't frustrated that you're not taking their advice when really, like, you just don't need any. And so I want to thank people for listening to this. I hope it's been helpful, kind of a deep dive in grief and caregiving and the waves, and it comes and goes, and that doesn't mean that you're not doing really well. It just means that sometimes it's a hard day. So please rate us. If you like us, give us 5 stars. If you don't, lose where the rate button is. And follow us along on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. And always, you can find us on the planningandprotecting.com website. There's wonderful resources on there. We're revamping the website. We're really excited about the new things that are getting pushed out, and we're constantly pushing out new things, new resources. And so we're super excited, and we want to thank you for listening with us.